Gonna get started shortly. We just want to let people trickle in before we get into everything.
For sure.
So how's Aya's sleep doing?
So, okay, I wanted to tell you that thank you
Yes.
so much for the advice that you gave me, because it just changed everything yesterday. So we woke her up a little bit earlier and in the morning, because, okay, let me give a little background. So
Yeah.
essentially Aya's sleep has been in a progression, right? That's what we call it, right? So she just turned 20 months, but she's been having a hard time going to bed like earlier. And so I just took your advice, and I had her wake up earlier yesterday, and then she had an earlier nap, and it just set the whole day in like a better routine for us. It was really great.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
I know sometimes we're afraid of like capping a nap because bedtime's too late, but the more that we're adjusting the schedule, the more that our children will adjust with it. So like maybe we'll have a chance to talk about even like early rises. When babies are waking up really early, we should actually be putting them to sleep earlier. So we'll talk a little bit about that. It sounds a little crazy, but a little adjustment can go a long way.
Cool. Awesome. I'm excited.
So I think we're probably good to like start off with some introductions on who we are. Some people joining might not know our backgrounds. And so I'll just speak quickly as to who I am. So I'm Holland Razimore. I'm not Adeline May. I know some people think I'm Adeline, but Adeline's actually my daughter. So I am officially a baby-led sleep and well-being specialist, which is a big, long word. What does this mean? So essentially, I support families in a holistic way. So I don't just look at your baby's sleep. I look at everything from their health to emotional well-being, because emotional well-being has a lot of effect on our sleep. So in a holistic way, I look at not only baby, but at the parents. Parents also can be affecting their baby's sleep, which you may not know that. And I am not a sleep trainer. So there's a lot of people who misunderstand exactly what I do. So we don't use any type of sleep training. Sleep training is using separation-based techniques. And what I'm always focusing on is keeping that relationship between the mom and the baby strong, and ensuring that we're tuning into mom's instincts. So that's a bit about who I am. I wanted to just point out the fact that not a sleep trainer, sleep and well-being specialist, love what I do, and excited to have everyone join. And there's just been so much great feedback already and support for our live. And Reem, why don't you tell everyone what you do? Because when you said you're an osteopath, I was like, sorry, what is that?
Totally. Yeah. A lot of people actually who even live in Canada still don't know what osteopathy is in general. But so I am currently I'm entering my final year at the Canadian College of Osteopathy to become an osteopathic manual practitioner. So essentially what we do is we look at the body as like a functioning unit. So everything is connected and every person is different. So there's not really like a cookie cutter way to treat someone. It's just based on what they come in presenting with. And so we're looking at different structures in the body. We look at muscles, joints, ligaments, bones. We work with organs and the fluids of the body, so like the blood and the lymph. And we use our hands. So as a manual practitioner, we use our hands to assess different structures. And then based on how the patient's body is able to move biomechanically, and also if they're having any dysfunction, then we address those. So that's in a nutshell what we do. But it's so much deeper than that. There's so many facets and layers to it. Like an onion, you're constantly just like peeling back the layers, and in this process of like learning and understanding what it is that we do and how we can get to the root of a problem instead of just treating symptoms. So I'm really excited to talk about that with us today.
Yeah, 100%. And I think the story of how we met is like kind of interesting, and just like our journey of how we got here. So I just want to like take a moment to acknowledge that and just share what our story is and our journey. So we met like when our children were much younger. I think it was probably like 6 months ago, 8 months ago.
I think it was closer to like over a year ago.
Maybe a year ago, yeah. So I was on maternity leave, you were on maternity leave. So of course we were out at a restaurant having lunch, right, with our significant others. And I think we were like the only two people in the restaurant.
We were.
And you were over there. I think you were like nursing your daughter. I was nursing my daughter. And we just kind of looked at each other like, hey, I see you. And you actually asked me from across the room, you said, do you know any like mom groups that I can join? Like, I need to get out there. And I was just like, yes, like, because I was in your shoes before, you know, with having Adeline a little bit older. So I think we just connected on Facebook. I sent you over a list of places. And then it had to have been 6 months later, we actually saw each other again with our significant others and our daughters at like a bagel coffee shop. And that's when we really connected, and we were like talking about our businesses and our passions. And we were like, we're so in line with like how we think. And like, here we are today, you know. I just think nothing it happens by chance. I think everything happens for a reason. And I think our paths are meant to cross, and
Absolutely.
here we are.
Absolutely. So good.
So yes, everyone that has joined, thank you guys so much for being here. We received a lot of questions, super thankful for that. We are going to do our best to get through as many as we can. And the first one actually, I think, is a great one to start with because as we mentioned, osteopathy is a topic that people are not totally familiar with. So the first question that we got from a mom is, what things does an osteopath help with after birth? So Reem, I'll let you dive in.
I'm so excited to talk about this because there are so many things that can happen like post-birth. And regardless of how your birth went, the sooner that you get in to see an osteopath, the sooner that they can assess what's happening. And then if there are any issues, the sooner that we tackle them, the quicker then we can resolve them, right? Mm-hmm. So that's just like with anything. And we recommend for women to go right after baby's born, and they can go for baby and for mom, which is awesome. In specific to mom, right? Like, let's talk about mom a little bit first. Yes. We tend to talk about baby first and kind of like forgetting what we can do for mom. But let's say, for example, if you had a vaginal delivery, everything was totally normal. There were no forceps, there was no vacuum. What's actually happening is there can be some scar tissue because the way the baby travels down through the vaginal canal, right? And so I want to like really point out that scar tissue is really big on our methodology list, It's at like the high priority. And why is that? So imagine you have a scar somewhere, whether it's a C-section scar or scar tissue, or you had shoulder surgery, wherever it is. You can imagine you have a scar here, then that tissue becomes like sticky, right? And now what's happening to the whole system of the body? Everything starts pulling in that direction, right? So there's this kind of like tension that creates, and now that's creating lines of tension, lines of stress. We have to understand that the body is an adaptive mechanism, okay? It's constantly moving, it's constantly changing. And so when we have this additional stress, in addition to everything else that's happening to the body, that's something that we really want to look at, because we want there to be like a lot of mobility, a lot of freedom for movement. We want the body to be able to express itself in different directions. So that's like one thing that you could go see an osteopath for. So if you have, for example, a C-section scar, that's something that you could go see an osteopath for. Let's say you're having problems holding your pee, because that happens to a ton of women.
Me, still today. If I jump up like too roughly, it's like, uh-oh.
Yeah. And we don't know that there's like things that we can do that we don't have to live like this, you know? And it's something that we can work with is the pelvic floor muscles. There's different like pressure systems within the body that we can address. So this is just some other things that we would typically go to see. Now, in regards to baby, there are so many things that like the baby could present with. For example, The reason that it's normally suggested for babies to be delivered vaginally is because what's actually happening is that the bones of the skull are being properly formed once they go through the canal. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So if that baby doesn't have that quote unquote trauma, then these bones are not getting to be compressed together properly to create the mechanical movements that we want these bones to do. So that's one reason we would go. Another reason, which I think we're going to talk about today, is colic or constipation.
Mm-hmm.
If babies are experiencing that, or even if adults are experiencing colic or constipation, I mean, not colic for adults, but constipation for adults, we definitely want to assess different structures within the body that go along the whole digestive system. So that's starting from the mouth, the tongue, the teeth, esophagus and stomach, and all of that stuff. And even in a time now when we're talking about immunity, you know, like everyone wants to boost their immunity, the lymphatic system is something that we really pay attention to within osteopathy, because that's the whole like garbage disposal of the system. We're getting rid of all of this junk, detoxing all of that stuff, getting that out there. And we need our lymphatic system to have a strong immunity. So those are
Yeah.
some things that we can definitely work with.
Kyla said, interesting. I agree. It is very interesting stuff. And just to kind of segue into another question we had is, there are some people who don't quite understand the difference between a chiropractor and an osteopath. So can you just very briefly explain what is the main difference between a chiropractor and an osteopath?
Totally. So I'm not a chiropractor, so I can't attest to exactly everything that they cover within their school. But what I can say is for us is that we're always looking at the body as like working together. You can't isolate one body part from the rest of the body because they're all connected. So even though someone comes in with I'm presenting with this is what's happening to me. And we need to look at everything that's connected to that. So we look at the organs, we can manipulate the organs, we work with the muscles, we work with different types of tissue, and we try to understand what happened in embryology, in the development of the baby, and that becoming an adult. And so we're using all of these different concepts. And the most important thing is that we're always keeping a living picture of the body in our mind. So understanding what is where, what's next to it, what's in front of it, what's behind it, where do these nerves pass through, and we want to use that in our assessment, in our health history, so we understand where this body has been, and then how we can help restore maximum mobility. So yes, we can still do manipulations like chiros. Are they they're a little bit more gentle is what I would say, only because we're setting up the parameters. So like the vertebra has nowhere else to go but in that direction. So we're really trying to be really precise with what we do. But again, with using our hands, we are just working with the body. The body in front of you is going to tell you how to treat it. So
totally. I know Disowned Family Sleep just said this is fascinating. And it is. It's like making you think of your body in a different way, right?
Well, you know what I love about what you're addressing with parents is that we're looking at in a holistic approach. We're looking at what's all happening, what's happening in the external environment, what's happening in the internal environment, and how can we integrate the two together. That's literally everything that you're doing, right?
Yeah. 100%. It's holistic sleep support, right? It's not one size fits all, right? It's you're looking at it. Everybody's different.
Exactly.
Amazing. So want to get into our a question here that we have that I think we'll both have a little bit to say about it. And I think this is a common question that probably a lot of parents have and challenges that parents have. So this mom asked, or is said, my biggest challenge comes as night rises. Right? Okay, bedtime's coming close. The day can go very calmly, but when it comes to bedtime, I feel that I spend 4 times the amount of energy that I put out during the day. I find myself laying next to my child, hugging, caressing, which is amazing. And I love this time together. But there are days that it can take up to 3 hours. That's a lot. It could be exhausting and frustrating for me, of course. And so she's asking, what do you think I can do to improve time, make it not as long, and to teach him independent sleep? So I have a lot of notes here of a couple things I want to talk about. First of all, you're not alone. My daughter also has moments where she will take forever to go to sleep, and then sometimes it takes 5 minutes. So that's one thing to note, is that sleep is not linear. It's always changing. And the other thing to note is, how old is your child? Are they potentially going through a sleep progression? So I called it progression, not a regression, because they're developing, right? There's the 4 month, the 6 month, the 8 to 10 month, the 12, the 18, the 24 months. So they're happening pretty often, because our children from 0 to 2, like, they are developing so much. They're learning how to crawl, they're learning how to talk, they're learning how to walk. Like, so much is going on that this disrupts their sleep. Imagine you have a new project and you're super excited about this project. When you go to sleep, you're going to think about this project. That's what our kids are doing. They're thinking about their skills that they're building. So that's the first thing to look at, is how old are they? Is it a sleep progression? And are they tired enough? Like, sometimes our children are just not tired enough. And a couple things to note on that. Are they getting outside enough? Fresh air, the sunlight, the circadian rhythm, which I know you can touch on. Are they exerting enough energy outside, right? They might just not be tired enough. Or on the flip side, are they overtired? Sometimes when you're so tired that then you get to like super energized, and it's because you're overtired, and you just like become a little bit, you have a harder time falling asleep because you have too much sleep pressure, too much cortisol, right? That you can't calm down. And another thing I want to talk about, which we had a couple questions on, is how to create kind of like the perfect environment, the perfect bedtime environment and routine. So I always like to say, think of it as like a spa environment. Like, how would you like to fall asleep, right? If everything is too bright in the room, that's also going to inhibit your melatonin levels, but it's also just going to make you overstimulated. So dim lights, maybe even like a candlelit bath, who knows? It sounds nice. Making sure you don't have any TV or tablets, electronics before bed, right? That blue light also inhibits the melatonin. So one thing I'd love to have is I have a Himalayan salt lamp in my room, which is like an orange light, and this is nice and dim. It doesn't cause any issues with the blue light. And have your routine as something that's special for both of you. So do you perhaps have like a special book that you guys read before bed, or you have like a special box in your room that's like, these are our specific special toys that we play with before bed, right? So your children having a bedtime routine is important for them to know that there is like, some rhythm to the day. And another one I want to touch on that we don't think about is, did they get enough connection time during the day? Because this mom is talking about how the child is wanting to cuddle and be with the mom. And it makes me think, maybe the mom was really busy that day. Maybe she didn't have a lot of one-on-one time with their child. And our children, they crave closeness and attention. They need that in order to feel secure and to fall asleep. Falling asleep is a very vulnerable state, and they need to make sure that their attachment with their parent is secure before they fall asleep. So I would just ask, that parent, make sure that you're having quality one-on-one time, eye contact, getting to their level, phones away, have that connection, and maybe that will help. And I will talk about the independent piece, but Reem, is there anything else you want to add on to that?
Well, I just want to say it's so incredible, like when you reframe it like that, to say like, because you can go from a place of where you are feeling anxiety because they're not falling asleep to like, oh, they just really love me and they just really want to be close to me. And when you reframe it like that, it kind of like relieves the anxiety or the frustration that can come up. Mm-hmm. So I just want to say that's like awesome that we have sources like these, like what you're offering to us is amazing. I would just elaborate more a little bit about the melatonin. All of our hormones come from like our pituitary gland. So we're not only in osteopathy just checking how is this space moving, making sure that there's enough fluid, because we need fluid for everything to move. We think of like Nutrition is blood flow. It's just getting that proper circulation to those areas. So if anything gets compressed or squeezed, or like you bang it too many times, what happens? It gets irritated. It doesn't move the same way, right? It has a little bit of stiffness to it. We just want to make sure everything's moving properly. And so in making sure that not only are the hormones being made, but they're being distributed, they're being released at the right time. So these are things that we would look at from an osteopathic lens in regards to that. But it's awesome.
Perfect. And then the other piece that the parent mentioned is, how do I teach him independent sleep? And this is like such a hot topic that I just want to touch on, because we are so obsessed with having our children be independent, like so obsessed. Like from the moment they're born, it's like, okay, they're going to go in their crib and they're going to be away from us for 12 hours. And they're going to sleep there all night. And we can't hold them too much because, you know, we don't want them to be needy and we don't want them to like be dependent on us. They're meant to be dependent. Like from 0 to 1 year old, your child actually doesn't see themselves as a separate person. They see themselves as an extension of you. And how do I say this? Their senses, the only way that they know that you're around is through hearing, through seeing, through smelling, through their senses. Once you leave the room, they don't know that you're coming back. They don't understand that. They don't have that understanding yet. So they need to feel you in order to understand that you're there. So I just want to say that with regard to independence, it's going to happen naturally. Like we just need to trust in our children that they will become independent when they're ready. When we push them too early, it actually makes them more clingy. It actually makes them more worried and self-conscious and feeling like something's missing. So we really need to have our children take our love and our attachment for granted. You know, we need to make sure that their love bucket's filled up, and when their attachment needs are met, they'll feel secure to go out in this world as an independent person. But if we're pushing it too quickly, we're going to create a child that is not going to be secure. So that's a big one. I think we have this misconception of like, children need to be independent, and I'm here to say that they're dependent for a reason, and we need to be there to support that, and they will become independent when they're ready. So there we have it.
Totally. Totally. Don't listen to all those people that are telling you, oh, put your baby down, they'll be spoiled. You know, you only have so much time to spoil your child. That's like such a normal motherly thing to do, you know?
I always remember being in a restaurant when Adeline was probably like a month old, and she was sleeping on my shoulder, and the waitress came up to me and said, "Oh, you're going to spoil her." And I was like, because she's sleeping on my chest? Like, are you like, wow. Like people are they have a real skewed understanding of child's needs, really.
It's just, well, I think it's just lack of awareness, lack of
It
like
is.
understanding, you know, and we're here to just try to help educate everyone, to help empower them, because what we
Yes.
realize is from this last generation, we realize like we need a lot of attachment. We need
Yes.
love.
Yeah. No, we totally do. So I'm going to segue into something else. We're going to talk about colic now for a moment. We're going to get real serious and talk about colic.
Well,
Because
we had a lot of interest, right?
This is a serious topic. So many mom groups that I'm on talk about having a child that has colic and how difficult it is. And I just think there's a lot of misinformation out there. Doctors are misdiagnosing, giving incorrect treatments for it. And I know you have information on colic, and would love for you just to kind of educate a bit on what you understand of colic in babies.
So I think that what we need to do at this point in time, we need to start restructuring how our minds are understanding these diagnoses, because what we're being presented with is symptoms. Like colic is a symptom, constipation is a symptom, and you're like, okay, I've heard that before. What does that even mean? Okay, so there's something else that's happening in the body that's resulting in colic. So colic is like a resultant of something else happening. Okay. So as an osteopath, we need to assess where the dysfunction is, and it could be from a number of places. So when you look into books, when you look into research, the way that they describe colic is this: the baby's going to be crying like incessantly. They can say it can be up to 3 hours a day for every day for 3 weeks. That's like really intense. It usually starts at 1 month, it peaks at 2 months, and then if it goes untreated, it can last up to 4 or 5 months. So that's a lot of time for a baby to be in severe pain. And what's actually happening is the colon is spasming. So what we want to look at is not just the colon, but everything that's associated with the colon, different ligaments. We want to look at the valves and making sure that all the valves are open properly and they're moving in proper mobility. So that way they're allowing that once the food passes through the esophagus, it becomes like we chew it, it becomes a bolus. We want to check the stomach. We want to make sure the stomach is creating the proper, has the acid to help digest the food, but then it's creating the bicarbonate to help balance the acid. So these are all the different things that we want to look at. It's not just like, oh, it's a problem in the colon. Like, well, but why is that happening? Like, what is causing that to happen? And these are the questions that we need to start formulating in our minds as moms, as individuals, as human beings who are interested in our health. We need to think, what is causing this to happen? Is this an end result, or is this the root of the problem? And if it's not the root, what is the root? Why would that happen? So
yeah,
that's like, and like, I do want to address that with constipation as well for people, because I had a lot of people messaging me, please talk about constipation. Even in adults, we're looking at constipation. What is that? It's an energetic block. So that could manifest physically, whereas like you're having slow motility of your bowel movements, or it could be like, let's talk on an emotional level. It could be that you're holding on to something and you don't want to let it go. Or does that make sense? Because
totally.
The reality is that emotions can manifest into something bigger. You know, we hold a lot of stress in the body, and that's for babies, that's for adults, that's for everybody. So paying attention to these things, right?
And talking about emotions is actually the next thing that I wanted to touch on with the question, because emotions, like you said, it is a big thing for us, for our kids. So I'll read this question and then we'll chat through this. And for those who just joined, it's Holland Reismore from Adela May Sleep and Reem from Vipasa Mama. We are talking today about a whole bunch of things. We've already talked about colic. We've talked about, importance of bedtime routines, about osteopathies, and we're digging in deep and we're continuing on here. So thank you guys again for being here live with us. So, question about emotions. Mom is asking, am I supposed to hold space for my child's emotions before the age of 1? I'm trying to find a balance for that. How do I know when to let him cry and when to distract him? For example, he wants to eat the remote. We've all been there. So I take it away. He cries and I distract him by giving him something that he can chew. Is that bad? Do I let him cry because I've taken something away? I'm curious how to distinguish between allowing him to have big emotions or not. Genuinely not sure. So first of all, love this question. And the first thing I want to touch on here is that holding space for your children's emotion should happen at any age, no matter how old they are. A child should never be left alone to cry. They are not able to down regulate from a heightened state of stress. So they need a caring adult to co-regulate with them. And if they're left to cry alone, they are eventually going to calm themselves down, but they're still going to be stressed. They need us to be able to calm them down. So that's the first thing I want to mention. We also need to understand that when our children have emotions, they bring up emotions in us, right? Like I find when my daughter is upset, the hardest part for me is to be calm because she's bringing up stuff in me, right? So I think all emotions need to be supported. One thing to note about the age, though, that I wanted to mention because it's interesting, is she asked, you know, if they're under the age of 1. So when a child reaches the age of 9 months of 9 months old, there is a big shift happening in the child, and they start to develop a sense of autonomy. So this means that they are able to actually take responsibility for what is happening. And so the reason I'm saying this is because this is the age where we can start to add some boundaries, some loving limits, some loving boundaries. So for example, in what she said about the remote, you talk to your child, explain, mommy is taking the remote away because we don't need the remote. And it's totally fine for you to give them something else that they can chew. It's not, I'm not saying you have to take the remote away and cry so you understand you can't have this. It's take the remote away for this example, give them something to chew on, but you can chew on this. This is fine. But if they're still having emotions around not being able to have the remote, that's when you give them the space to have that. That's when you don't say, oh, you're okay, oh, stop crying, or turn on the TV. It's allowing them to process those emotions, because if we don't process the emotions, they don't just go away. They're in us, right? Like they stay in us, and these can manifest when you're older to having problems with your emotion, having problems expressing your emotions. This is why people turn to alcohol and drugs, because they're not able to express emotions, because they were never given that opportunity from their parents to feel safe to express themselves. So that's really what it is. It's just holding a safe space for our children. And that for me, that's been the hardest part. Reem, what do you, I'm sure you have lots to say about this.
You know, I do a lot of work with flower essences, which help, if anyone's not familiar with flower essences, it's basically help to balance emotions that come out of balance. And the one thing that I resonate with what you've talked about here is you don't have to do anything. You just have to hold the space, right? And in the process of holding the space, yeah, you're right, a lot of things are going to come up, but it's normal development of the child to have negative feelings. That is normal development.
Mm-hmm.
So just keeping that in mind helps us to, again, reframe the picture and say, okay, well, they're allowed to feel like this. They're entitled to feel like this. Like, think of all the terrible things that happened in your life. Don't you wish just sometimes someone would have said to you, it's absolutely okay that you feel this way. It is totally okay that you feel this way. And to express it. And what I think is really beautiful, if we watch children really closely, we can see them express and then get over it.
Yes.
This is a model that we as adults, like we need to learn from, that we don't really just let it go and we hold on to it. And when we hold it, that becomes tension, tightness in muscles, tightness in the chest, anxiety, fear. That's what spirals out. So paying attention to that, that's what I would suggest.
For sure. And that's why I say don't distract. If a child is going through something and they're like at that breaking point of like, okay, I'm almost there, and then boom, the parent comes in and distracts them, it's like, then they didn't have their work done, you know? So I know for me, it was like, why would I let my daughter cry? That seems like an evil thing to do, but it's not necessarily letting them cry alone. You're supporting them through it. It's different. And it's, I think, been really helpful for us and our family and our understanding of how to support my daughter. So.
And for me, like, I didn't have that information in the beginning. So I was doing some of these things where I was like, I don't want her to cry. I want to like be there for her every step of the way. But now coming in contact with all of this information, it just really helps you to elevate your style of parenting and your style of being in general.
Yeah. Kyla said, children easily forgive. And they do, right? And that actually kind of brings me into the next, I love that you asked that question, Kyla, or mentioned that, because the next question I had here was, when you feel like an awful parent for needing a moment, how do you bring yourself back? How do you bring yourself back from that? So a couple of things I want to mention here. Us moms, we cannot do it all, right? Like, we need to ask for help. we live in a society where we think that we need to do it all. We need to be the perfect mom and be the perfect wife and have the house clean and do a big elaborate dinner and da 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 da. And it's like, when is there time for you? You're still a person. You need to have a moment. So I would say you're not awful for needing a moment. You're a human. And you know, gone are the days that we had the village of support, right? When they say it takes a village to raise a child, it really does. But we are now living in a society where we don't have a village. We have a husband or a partner that goes off to work, and you are alone in your house with your child, and you know you're expected to do it all. So what I would say to this, need help, right? Maybe dad comes in or partner comes in and helps with bedtime routines. So you have some time to yourself. Maybe grandparents come over on the weekend so you can go and get a massage, or you can go meet up with a friend, or you can do some self-care. That's really important. And I noticed for myself, when I'm feeling like I'm not getting enough me time, I'm not the best mom. I'm not the best wife. I'm not the best version of myself. You will be a better parent, a better wife, a better person when you take care of yourself. So I would say don't feel guilty about it. Do it as a gift for your family, because we really need time for ourselves. So yeah, Reem, any thoughts on that?
I
Or
think
any, yeah,
you hit the nail on the head. It's like learning
yeah.
to ask for your space is really, it's a skill. It's a,
Yes. It's
and
hard to
so
ask for help. It really is. Sometimes we want to think that we're like superwoman, but you know, we're going to burn out eventually.
absolutely. For me, I love to meditate. It's like really important for me in my practice. So
Mm-hmm.
I suggest like do something for yourself for 3 minutes every day. You know what I mean? And like
Mm-hmm.
to meditate for 3 minutes and have a successful like intentional meditation is way more valuable than muscling through something for an hour and being miserable doing it. So
Mm-hmm.
and I use a technique that I learned when I attended Vipassana. It's called Anapana, where we're just like focusing our intention here. So anytime I start to feel myself getting like a little bit riled up, I just like try to like come back to my breath and like with eyes open, with like being present. I don't need to like check out of the moment, but just kind of like come back and observe my feelings and observe like what is causing me to feel like that, and just like with myself as it's happening, and then whenever I get the moment to separate myself, doing that. So, and it's okay to do that. It, like you said, it's absolutely okay for us to do that.
Yeah. For those that are listening, guys, put in a comment. What is like one thing that you would either love to do for yourself or that you do that really helps you, right? I know for me, you know, now I can't do it, but I could do it at home, was yoga. Like going out and doing yoga for an hour, like I just felt like a new woman, right? It just gave me that time to myself, get out of the house, do my own thing. And then you come back and you feel good. And they put it in the schedule, like schedule it out. When you have something in the calendar, you're not gonna say, oh, well, you know, I guess I'll do it tomorrow. Like go book that yoga class, pay for it in advance, right? So that you're almost like forcing yourself to take that time for yourself. Um, and another thing that kind of segues into this that was also asked was, what advice would you give to full-time moms who feel clueless, scared, and alone? How did you cope? So just want to mention here that there is like so much support that you get from friends and family when you're like pregnant, and then through labor and delivery, and maybe like the first like week postpartum. But then everyone's got to go back to their lives. Everyone's got to go back to work, and you know, you're left alone with baby, and it can be really lonely, and it can be scary. So some things that I did that I found that helped was just to like get out in the mom community. The mom community is so big, and I found that just like doing mom and baby yoga and meeting some moms that way, or you know, getting out in my neighborhood and like, you know, oh, you've got a baby in a stroller, I'm just going to come closer to you and say hi, because, you know, we're in the same boat. And sometimes it's just putting yourself out there to meet other moms. I think just really helps to know that you're not alone, because it can be really lonely.
Could
Like,
wave to someone across a restaurant.
yeah, exactly. Like you did. You're like, hello.
Yeah, I think look for your resources, you know, and if you don't know where to find your resource, like we're resources, you know, and just
Mm.
ask, just don't be afraid to ask other women, hey, where can I get plugged in? And like right now we're in a period of time where everyone's kind of more isolated, but there's still so much support online. There's people to talk to, there's people to ask questions. So just really looking for your resources, and that's gonna really help you to feel supported, especially in these times.
Definitely. A couple people wrote about what they like to do. So there, every night when I put my baby to sleep, I have all night for me. Yes, I know, right? That like once the baby's asleep, you're just like, oh my God, I'm free. Let's see. Amance wrote, I try to go for drives to breathe, listen to music, relax with or without baby. That's nice, actually. Like I know a lot of people will like to go for a drive. It just like kind of makes you different space, different environment. Put down the window, listen to music. I love that. Claudia wrote, having my hair done, a haircut or color. I was supposed to have a haircut before the shutdown happened. Yes, I hear that. I know. I'm the same. I mean, you can't see, but yeah, the hair is there's it's gonna continue to get interesting. Um, Disowned Family wrote, I try and get up 20 minutes before my daughter and stretch, meditate, yoga. I love that. And it's actually something that I'm trying to do. Uh, try. It's like either do it or don't do it. So I will do it. And I think, yeah, just having that time in the morning to yourself, even if it's like 20 minutes, it just sets your mind in a different way, you know? It gets you revved up more than just like, babe, right? You're just, it's a little time for yourself, I think. Okay, so a couple other things here that we can chat through because we actually got through quite a bit. We're just like going through it. I love it. There was a couple actually, Reem, before I get into anything else, is there anything that you wanted to touch on? Any topics that we haven't talked about yet that that you wanted to mention or anything like that?
There's just so much within like this like realm, you know what I mean? There's so
No.
many things. So if anyone has any questions right now, we can like open the floor to them. Um,
Yeah, I do have one. Someone was asking about early risings, and I did mention at the beginning here that I might touch on the early risings.
yeah, I
And
think you
so,
should because I think it would help people to know that.
right. Okay, good. So, early rising. So, what is an early rising, first of all? It's basically any time before 6 a.m. So, if you have a child that's waking up at 5 a.m. or 5:30, that would be considered like an early rising. And there's so many different reasons why this could be happening, but I'll just explain probably like the most common reason is they're overtired. And if they're overtired, the first adjustment I would make is to make bedtime earlier. And you're like, what? What? They're waking up early. Why would I make bedtime earlier? Isn't that going to screw everything up? Well, sleep begets sleep, right? The more sleep you get, the better your overall sleep quality will be. So let's say that your child is waking up at 5:30. Maybe try and put them down to sleep at like 6:30, depending on how your naps are, right? It all depends on like your nap schedule. And speaking of naps, if your child is like, let's say on 2 naps a day, if their morning nap is too early, that can also cause issues with the early waking. So trying to move that nap, the first nap later in the day can actually help just kind of move everything forward. It'll move the wake up forward. It'll move by moving the nap a little bit later. And sometimes depending on the naps, you might need to cap a nap. So if nap is happening a little bit too late, you might need to cap it. And I think the big thing here is just like also knowing your child's unique wake windows. So with my daughter, so she's almost 2 and she's on 1 nap, and her ideal wake window is like if she's up at 8 a.m., she'll usually go to sleep within 4.5 hours. And then after she's from her nap is usually 6 hours, she goes to sleep. So I mentioned wake windows because if we're not tuning into our children's wake windows, that's when they can get overtired. And overtiredness, it's just a ripple. They wake up more at night. They wake up early. It can be a big problem. So I would say try for an earlier bedtime. Try that first, and try to adjust the morning nap. Let's see. Someone just wrote here. Someone said, yeah, please early wakings. I extended awake times to lengthen naps that were 25 minutes. She wakes up at 4:30. Yeah, so there's for some people, I probably need a little bit more information to like give you a thorough recommendation on what to do. But early wakings is a common issue, and also like late bedtimes, like we talked about, that can also be an issue as well.
I just want to like just tie in
yeah.
there. Like if we ever look at like the traditional Chinese medicine clock and what organs are being are having their time at that time, right? So like from 11 p.m. to 1 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
That's like we're looking at the liver, right? And gallbladder in this time. We're looking at liver's 1 to 3, gallbladder's 11 to 1. So just knowing that there's a connection, and just like having that in the back of our minds, you know. So we want to try to get babies to bed earlier because we want to make sure that their body's able to detox properly, right? And all of these organs are able to do the work that they need to do within the body, because that works. They all have corresponding times, right? So
yeah, that's very interesting. I never thought of it that way. Like, you know, your organs, like your body does so much work at night to support you.
Yeah, absolutely. The body.
So I think that's good for today. What do you think, Reem? Or do you want to go through any other questions?
I just want to like take a moment to let everyone know where they can find me in case they have any more questions, or if they need a referral. I know I do want to go and say, because we talked about different things that osteopaths can do for the moms postpartum, but it's not within an osteopath's jurisdiction to do internal work. But let's say you find a pelvic floor physiotherapist who's also an osteopath. That's a really great combination, and someone that I would highly recommend you to go see in case you were having those like not being able to hold your pee, and like, you know, having those slips, right? And that if anyone else has any wants a recommendation for an osteopath to go see, that they can just find me at Vipassana Mama, and I'm sure that you're going to post it. And I'll also include my email. I'll send that to you, but it's just going to be my reemhabash@gmail.com. And feel free to send me any other questions that you guys have in the future. And hopefully you and I will do this again in the future. I would love to. Thank you so much for having me today. And just, it's such a awesome opportunity, because I feel like I'm learning as well as like sharing some knowledge. And this is all about like empowering you guys to understand that your body is doing everything it can to keep you alive. It's doing everything it can to keep you healthy. And so it's working for you. It's your advocate, and it's so intricate, but really starting to reframe our minds about how we understand what's happening inside of us, and asking those tough questions. Well, why is that happening? What could be causing that? And when we entertain that, we can start to make these connections that are already there. They're not at the forefront of our mind. So thanks again, Holland, for having me today.
Yes, thank you so much. And this live will be available for 24 hours. If you feel like you want to go back, if there's anything that you missed, it will be available for 24 hours. And I think I'm also gonna hopefully be able to save it and share it on my page, so it will live there. And like Reem said, I will make sure that I share her contact info. And for anyone who's on here doesn't know who I am, again, I'm Holland Razimore from Adeline May Sleep. I've been talking here with Reem from Vipassana Mama. We've been talking about a whole bunch of things: postpartum health, baby sleep, emotional wellness, all things about osteopathy, and it's been a great discussion. So thank you so much. Thank you all for your time today, for joining us live on our first live. And I feel good about what we talked about today. So I think this will probably happen again. I have a feeling.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.